All right, folks, if I could get you to settle back in, we're ready to move on.
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Everyone hear me now? I'm very excited about our next speaker, Marlowe Stoudamire. Spoke with him last night, and he has a lot of interesting things to say and important messages for all of us. As you know, this morning we talked about the challenges facing minor hockey and the culture of sport and how things need to change. And then Kim told us about the National Hockey League, how they're working on adjusting the culture of the game and adjusting as well to some of the challenges of trying to do that. And that naturally leads us to Marlowe. One of his clients is the Michigan State Police Force, and he's trying to help them introduce change in a very traditional environment, as you can imagine. And admittedly, that hasn't been an easy job, but we'd like to hear his thoughts about rearranging a very traditional environment, and that's the hockey environment, and his thoughts as well on reimagining the future of the GTHL. Let's listen to Marlowe now.
All right, good afternoon. Wake up. All right. I promise not to bore you. I'm going to move quickly. Some of these slides are designed to be rapid fire. If I go too fast, just say slow down. Can everybody say slow down? Slow down. All right, if I go too fast, tell me to slow down. Before I get started, the first thing I want to do, I just want to thank the GTHL for having me. They didn't have to do this. The entire committee, the staff, the wonderful volunteers, the sponsors, and those beautiful facilitators running around. It's been a group effort. We've been on this journey for some months, and it's just very fantastic. Give everybody a round of applause here for that. Also want to thank the NHL and the NHLPA, particularly under the leadership of Kim Davis, who is not only an amazing leader, she's a mentor of mine now. Rob K, my partner in crime, and Rob Zepp, the team. And there's a lot of other people in New York and in the Toronto offices behind them. And so the point that I'm making is that it's a team effort. These people are out front with the megaphone, amplifying the message, but it's really important that we all recognize that there are a lot of people behind the scenes. So that, I am a Detroiter, can't find time to go into Detroit. I could teach a class on that. But I do want to let you know, because of my experience in Detroit, I actually speak 4 languages. I speak fluent business, community, government, and philanthropy. And the reason why that's important is because at different times, people in those buckets speak different languages. Philanthropy talks to philanthropy. Business people talk business. The problem is they all have something in common in the middle. More than likely, it's the people. It's the people, the places, and the experiences of your environment that you're trying to influence, that you're trying to change and make life better. So no matter you're black, white, tall, short, city, suburb, it doesn't matter. We all want the same things, right? And at the end of the day, my job is to translate one to another to create greater value for all. And that's why I'm here today. So can we get to it? Yes? Yeah, okay. All right. So has your comfort zone become your prison? Every leader has an enemy, and that enemy is the status quo. The status quo is defined as a state of stasis where there's neither motion or development and where there's no hope of change. It is common knowledge that in business, as in life, we either advance or we decline, and there's really, to a degree, nothing in the middle. The status quo disguises decline. We are seduced into this false sense that things remain exactly the same when we're actually heading downhill, but so slowly that it's virtually imperceptible until a free fall occurs. And by the time we recognize we're falling, it's too late, baby. So a lot of times when people ask me about the free fall of the status quo that I talk about, they say, how do I stop from falling? Hold that thought. Last few months, I've been hanging out with the GTHL. And although I don't claim to be an expert, you are the experts in the room. I did get a small snapshot during my conversations with the team. I heard some words that really stuck out to me. This isn't everything. But some of the words that I heard were culture. I heard the word tradition. I heard the word diversity. I heard the word inclusion. I heard welcoming. I heard we want it to be exciting for everyone, safe for everyone. I heard we need solutions. Where are the opportunities, Marlowe? That's what this room is designed for. You're the best of the best. You're the brightest. You're the minds. The GTHL will not have the answers. They will not get the solutions. They will not have the culture, the tradition, the diversity, and put it in the right mix without you. See, here's the deal. You have all of the ingredients that you need. The problem is that the recipe needs to be updated. What's in your sandwich? What's in that lasagna? How do we mix all these ingredients together and make it taste good? Because sometimes you can have some of the best ingredients in the world and it'll be nasty, right? Tell the truth. So think about that. Those things stuck with me. However, welcome to reality. Now, before I go into the reality of the situation, the first thing I want to do is compliment you. This is not easy. This is an impressive organization. You have a rich history and a legacy that will stand the test of times, even if we do nothing else from today. The question is, who is that going to benefit? The question is, how do we dig deeper? How do we deal with the reality of the situation? Now, this reality literally came from conversations that I had with the GTHL. The first thing that I noticed is they said, oh, Toronto's the second most diverse, might be the most diverse city in the country, in the world. I said, great. But when I look at the reality of what's happening and how some of those people within that diversity aren't experiencing that same level of engagement, integration, it feels to a degree like a tale of two cities. I see that all around America. I see it in Detroit, where you have one strong part of the narrative and then the other side that's conflicting with it. And then people want to pick and choose which one that they're going to hang their hat on and ignore the fact that it's still a different story depending on who you talk to. The next thing that I noticed was I did a Google search. And this is me. I put this together the best I could. I Googled Toronto youth sports on the left side, and look at these images that came up. Mostly basketball. I see black kids. I see kids that look like me. On the right side, when I Google Toronto minor sports, I see all hockey and mostly white kids. Then I went to Google and I got the definitions. And youth and minor, the definitions are very similar, but it depends on semantics, and language sometimes matter. Language and imagery can shape everything. You can work your asses off in here, but if the language and the narratives don't match, you're losing. And my thing is, I didn't make this up. If you Google it, you'll find the same thing. And sometimes what people find, no matter what you say or what you do, that's who you are. Next. Then we talked about the dynamic of parents versus kids. They are both important. I found these comics online where people were making fun about parents being too engaged and forcing kids down a path. But then I also know that there's a couple of things that we talked about. Parents a lot of times are decision makers. They have the power of the purse. But the kids are the consumers. Kids are the one who are actually consuming your things. I have a 7-year-old and 11-year-old. They consume things differently. Kids are engaging differently. My kids know who every basketball player is in the NBA, and they don't watch NBA games. Do you know how they know? They play the 2K game on the computer. They're making decisions and choices. They're the influencers. They're the ones who are going to go home and beg mom and dad in a lot of situations. The parents have to make a decision. The point that I'm making is it's a dual path. And I think that's what Kim was talking to us about, that there has to be a dual path and we have to meet them where they are. You have to speak to, connect with your audience, not expect them to come to you. You have to come to them and integrate into their worlds. That was something that I learned. The other thing that I learned is that there's a balancing act here. It's possible for these two things to coexist. Development versus winning. Fun and enjoyable versus elite. Participation versus competition. Inclusive versus exclusive. Where's the balancing act? Nobody said this was easy. Nobody said you had to stop doing this stuff. What we're saying is that we have to have a yes and. It's not a but. It's not a no more. It's yes and. How do we do both until we can get to where we need to be? You ever heard the term, you got to crawl before you can walk? That's exactly what you have to do. Nobody's asking you to wake up tomorrow and be something different. We're getting you to recognize that this is the starting point. The hard work actually starts when you leave today, after today. Next. Know this guy? So this is interesting. The reason why this is interesting because he's what I would call the ultimate influencer. He has millions of followers on Facebook, Instagram, and he sets the tone. A lot of people follow what he says. They listen to his music. He even puts Toronto a lot of times in his music. There's a Google search that said that there's about 12 or 13 songs in which he references Toronto. Hell, I didn't even know what the 6 was until Drake started talking about it. I'm serious. The point that I'm making is that these are two different realities, though, right? There's one reality that tells you one thing. You see how clear that image is? The reason why that image is so clear, because when you go online and you do a Google search under high resolution, there's countless of high-res shots of Drake. This one, I think, was taken with somebody's phone, and it was the clearest image that I can find with him with a Leafs jersey on, right? If you think about where Toronto was 20, 25 years ago when the Raptors came into play, and you think about where the Raptors are now, think about the fact that you guys aren't just in a world of your own. Your country is not standing alone. You're in a global society. And the way that the United States consumes information and other people around the world is by influencers and tastemakers. And at the end of the day, this guy represents one of the biggest things that you're dealing with. You're dealing with competition from other leagues, not just pro sports leagues, other outside leagues that aren't tied to the GTHL, esports, and other things like the 24-hour news cycle and social media, and the fact that young people think that people who are on Facebook are old and they got kick and all of this TikTok stuff. You are competing every day. And these guys and young people and influencers set the tone. You're not just competing with yourself. You're not competing to see who can win the title. You're competing with things outside of your sport, so you better find a way to stick together. So this one is very important. Who are you? You all have to make a decision about who you are. Your identity, the fingerprint of who this organization is today and who it will be in the future is so important. I'm not going to stick on this point. But one thing I will say is, how do you see yourself? What do others see when they see you? What do they say? So when we say the transition game, what does that mean? You have to define it. And more importantly, what does it look like when you get there? See, at the end of the day, we're all searching. Everybody, we're searching. We're searching for solutions. Most of us wouldn't have jobs if we weren't searching because problems would be solved and we can go away and do something else. As a consultant, I always say my job is to consult myself out of a job. I say that. I don't mean it. I need the money, right? So, yeah, I'm searching for an answer, but I'm also searching for the next project, right, Kim and Rob? I mean, that's me, right? It's true. So it's time for us to keep it real. Let's stop fronting. Let's stop playing. In Detroit, we say fronting. That means you're acting or faking, right? Let's stop fronting. Right? Slow down. The point that I'm making is we have to keep it real. We have to be realistic about where we are. And we're still searching, and that's okay. We don't have the answers. We're not going to walk out of here with the anecdote and the silver bullet. But what we can agree on is that we have work to do, and we have a good starting point. See, this is really important. This is about ambition a lot. A lot of times, ambition can drive you crazy. You know you want a good, prosperous, and fulfilling life. You know you want amazing experiences. You know you want growth and stability. But for the unseen of tomorrow, you're on this journey. And when you're on a journey like this, sometimes your world can feel like it's upside down. Your senses are off. You're going through twists and turns like this movie, Doctor Strange. And when that happens, to be honest with you, and I can sympathize with everybody in here, it's hard to feel productive. It's hard to feel like you're on the right path. You hear all this data and you're like, damn, I'm trying. We're doing things. It's tough. Nobody says it wasn't. But I started thinking to myself, like, going through all of this, what do I want them to think about? What do I want this group to do? And really, what I think we can all start doing is figuring out how to reimagine the future of minor hockey as a fun, inclusive, and positive experience that represents the diversity of Greater Toronto that you have, while weaving in the best of old and new Canadian cultural dynamics throughout the fabric of the game in a substantial way. We can do both. I really believe that. But if that's going to happen, you got to take the next exit, baby. You got to get off and accept the fact that change is coming. So here's 10 reasons why a lot of people resist change. Some people don't want to lose control. Some people struggle with the level of uncertainty that comes their way. I had a boss that used to always say, I hate surprises. Routine and environmental changes are reasons why people resist change. Loss of face or defensiveness. And what I mean by that, imagine if you're the dude that created a process or created a program and people came and told you it was terrible. Now, the question is, are you going to let your ego get in the way? Or are you going to listen to people in this room who I think at this point, after being in here all day, we trust? We got to trust each other. The question is that can you assume innocence? Can you assume that they're not trying to hurt you? Can you assume that they're not trying to destroy something that you built? Or can you say that status quo disguises decline? Competency concerns. Will I be exposed? Will people think I'm not strong enough? You know, I've been faking it for years. You know, I'm just the guy that pushes pencils. Oh, now I have to do real work. Your workload can increase. It can. There can be a ripple effect. One thing changes, the next thing changes, and before you know it, you don't recognize where you are. Past resentments come in. You know what they say about sports? Winning cures everything. As soon as you start losing, your breath stinks, your feet stink, you're horrible. I hate when you chew gum like that. Every problem comes out. Past resentments kick in. And then the last thing is sometimes change is a real threat. Sometimes people do lose jobs. Automation, globalization, artificial intelligence, those things are real. But it's okay. Because as you've learned today with all of the data and all of the information, if we do nothing, we die. See, this is what it really boils down to sometimes. The world is changing. And here's what I want you to remember. The culture of today's world of reality will eat your strategy for lunch. If you think you're going to strategize yourself around change and shifting demographics and technology and youth movements and all of these other things, you're kidding yourself. But not only are you kidding yourself, you're delaying the inevitable. Change is going to happen with or without us. We have to remember that. So the question is, what do we do about it? And so your plan is the straight line. Nobody said you still wouldn't get there, but it's just going to take you a different path. You may have to go through all of this. And I would actually contend you don't have to do it alone. See, sometimes we know we don't want the hand that we're dealt. We don't want to accept that future. We deserve a better future, the one that we want, not the one that the status quo pushes us into. And you're right. Who says you have to play when you're dealt a bad hand, when you're inherited a bad situation, right? You don't have to. The reason why I like to show this is that at the end of the day, you have a choice. The dealer just presents a challenge in front of you. You have a choice on how you play the hand. You can walk away. You remember that song by Kenny Rogers? You gotta know when to hold 'em. Know when to fold 'em. What's the rest of it? Know when to walk away. Know when to run. So anyway, I just like to throw that in there. The point that I'm making is you have a choice. See, listen, this is really what we're coming to. So I went around this in a roundabout way, but really there's some science and consulting to hit this. You're about to actually hear what I think some of the recommendations are. I'm not going to give you everything because I think we might have some business later, fellas. But, oh yeah, don't get it twisted. So you could either accept missed opportunities or you could take the opportunity, right? And so I think there are some opportunities in front of you as a group, as an organization, as individuals, as a community that you should be thinking about. Again, I'm not doing this in a very academic way, but I really want you to know there's something behind this. So the first thing is that I think it's really time for a pivot. And I think that what you all have to agree is that you support the GTHL as an organization, as a body, as an agenda to reposition itself and really get behind the board and leadership and give them more teeth than bark. They need to be able to have more weight to be able to execute some of these things. It's very difficult to implement and execute if there's no weight behind it, if there's no strength behind it. And that comes from your support. It doesn't come from a board sitting in a room on their own trying to figure things out, and you know they don't have the damn answers. There are no kids in there. There's no diversity in there. But there's diversity across this room. And so collectively, you all come together. And I think that the reposition and the pivot and the time for everybody to recognize that this is true. The next thing that I'm recommending is to think about the story. I have something that I say to people all the time, and I want you to hear me loud and clear. Old narratives are new narratives until you replace them with new narratives. Does that make sense? Meaning, if the story from 20 years ago has not changed and you haven't been intentional about telling a new story, that's the new story. If I Google something and it comes up a story from 2001 and there's nothing new, that's the new stuff I'm finding. That's what I'm reading about. And the history of storytelling tells you there's different vehicles and different mechanisms. And regardless of what comes next, the question is what story you tell next. Being intentional about the stories you tell is going to bring so much validity and credibility to the great work that you're doing. So let's just stop there. Nobody said you weren't doing anything. Nobody said that you weren't putting forth great effort. Kim talked about it. There's diversity here. Tradition versus traditional thinking. How we tell the story is going to be so important. What we talk about when we leave here today is going to be so important. You know why? Because we can't be the tree in the forest. Everybody in here has the potential to be the tree in that forest. And what I mean by that, if a tree falls in the middle of the forest and nobody here, does it make a sound? Does it really make a sound? Does it matter if we're in this room and we don't leave and do something? But we got to talk about it. We have to change the narrative. If you don't change it, either somebody else is going to tell your story and get it wrong, Canada, Toronto, GTHL, community, or it just won't get told. And guess what you'll have? The old narrative. This is deliberate. A storytelling campaign for your organization to talk about the good work, to talk about the black and brown brothers and sisters in here, to talk about the gender equality, to talk about everything. Kim gave you a blueprint. Stephen gave you a blueprint. And guess what? You're walking blueprints. That's why you're here. And those of you who come tomorrow, tell the story. What should be in the story? What should we talk about? What vehicle should we use? Should we use social media? Should we use whatever it may be? I'm trying to tell you that you're next in line. You're up to bat. Get off the bench and get in the game. You can't do that alone. Oh, yeah, thank you. I got about 50 seconds. I might go over by like a minute or two, so I'm cool. All right. What I've learned is there's no way that you can tell story without the proper rebrand. Let me explain something to you. Rebrand isn't just new logos. It's not just new colors. Rebranding is positioning where your brand shows up, who it intersects with, who you're talking to. People consume brands differently, right? Remember I talked about you're competing? You're competing for people's time and attention before you ever ask for their money. Fan doesn't necessarily mean customer, right? So the question is, how do you connect with audiences? How do you show up? How do you show up? How does your brand show up? Your brand might be the dude who's working the popcorn machine. Your brand might be the person that sees you and you don't even know what you're doing. You're out shopping with your family and they're like, oh, I know that guy from the GTHL, and you turn around and you're a schmuck to him. I didn't say that it was going to be easy. I'm not saying you have to be perfect, but you have to be aware. Your brand shows up everywhere. You can't let an incident that happens on the news represent who you are. I'm in America and I hear about something on the news. I'm not going to say names. I know that doesn't represent what hockey is really all about and the people behind it. But guess what? Your brand and your narrative is too quiet. It's too muted. Assume the damn throne. You guys are good. You're doing good. You can do it. But If you don't tell the story and rebrand, reposition, and show up, put your brand where it needs to show up. If you want to engage more people of color, show up with your brand, but show up with people of color with your brand. People identify with those that they can relate to, they know, like, and connect with. Show up differently with your brand. Would you show up to a gunfight with a knife? No. So don't show up to a black community with a white guy sometimes. It's real. You have to be realistic about this. Next slide. Let's see. All right, so I created this. Don't get mad. So anybody know this guy? This guy says, oh, the GTHL experience should be fun, inclusive, and positive for everyone. Then the next guy says, oh, I know. Maybe we should prioritize development over winning. The next person says, where are our blind spots? We have blinders on. We don't know everything. Maybe we need to talk to other people. Then the other guy says, wait a minute. How about we look in the mirror and face the problem staring at us? And then somebody gets mad and throws him out the window. And then on his way down, what does he say? Toronto might be the most diverse city in the world. Why aren't we? The next thing that I'm recommending is, whether it's at the board level, whether it's with parents, players, coaches, officials, try to avoid that one red seat. Try to figure out how to create representation at the table, in conversations, throughout everything you do. We're not talking about tokenism. We're talking about real things. This isn't just about hiring people. This is about who you contract, who you spend your money with in supply chain. This is about who you have conversations with. This is about how you bring conversations. Oh, and by the way, this is who you ask questions. The worst thing in the world you could do is sit in a room and design for kids and not talk to kids. The worst thing in the world a man can do is say what women need and not have a woman there. Like, it's real. And I'm going to tell you right now, you will get canceled. We live in the cancel culture right now. The first mistake you make, people get on you. And what you have to survive is the benefit of the doubt. And the only way you have the benefit of the doubt is you have to show a track record and a history, meaning old narratives are new narratives until you replace them with new narratives. Representation is something that I'm recommending for this organization. And don't just look at the board. We got to find a way to be deliberate about it, but not have a level of tokenism. And it's not easy. I'm almost there. Here's one of my biggest ideas that I came up with. So post-event, the GTHL should consider establishing what I would call an annual scorecard. This puts the power back in the hands of the organization and protects you. It prioritizes inclusion, development, and positive experiences while trying to balance winning, money, which, let's keep it real, if you can't pay for stuff, it don't happen, and class-based exclusivity. Scorecards, I believe, are powerful tools, and in this case, they can improve stakeholder accountability. They can align everyone around standards. They can provide guidelines for what people need to prioritize and offer layers of competition that are different than just on ice for recognition, endorsement, certifications, validations, and then somehow, if it's possible, tie it to mechanisms on how people get funded. That's what I do with philanthropy. I tell philanthropy, give people a roadmap on how to get the money. You can create the guidelines, you can create the structure to get everybody in the same pathway. Because one of the biggest things that I saw in that meeting, there's a lack of consensus across the board, whether at the club level, executive level. You got to get on the same page. This ain't just about your individual space. This is about everybody trying to survive. And so these are the things that I recommend. So the red, yellow, and green represents what a traditional scorecard looks like. I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with a dashboard. The thing in the middle is wayfinding. So I believe there's two things that you have to do. You have to give people a level of orientation on where you are. So when you go to the mall or you go to an amusement park or you go to the airport and you see the big map, what's the first thing you see on the map? You are here. Sometimes this conversation can get so big, people get lost, they don't know where they fit. We have to do a better job of showing people where they fit. They don't have to do everything. Here's your part, here's your role, this is where you fit, this is where we're going. Wayfinding is important because you have to direct them, onboard them to where the opportunities are, and show them where they are, and then give them something in return. Validation. Wouldn't it be great if there was a GTHL awards that were different? Not necessarily for the kids, but stars and people across the industry who are getting it right, the best practices. I don't know if you already do that, but it works. The certifications. And then you talk to the funders. You talk to people and you say, guess what? We have a very descriptive level of measurements and tools that shows how we're moving the needle. Remember earlier, Stephen talked about the measurements and the lead versus the lag metrics? This is real. It's not just about what the kids are producing on the court. Take the power back. Not necessarily to just get people to register and to sign up, but to have some level of control over your organization before it gets away from you, the free fall. See, I'm almost done. I'm getting there. So performance is really important. You want to measure that. But I would beg to offer and suggest that in addition to performance, engagement is equally important. It's equally important. And we're talking about how you engage. I'm almost there. So I know I told you a long story, but my hope is there's something that you can identify in something in this story. There are things in here that impact your bottom line. Everybody has a bottom line. Even the homeless guy on the street has a bottom line. A lot of people don't realize it, but organizations can often die silently, and you won't always be able to see it on the surface. And while it's happening, business as usual can even happen, or even appear to thrive. Just like a family with a big house, nice car, 401k, but behind the scenes, everything is falling apart. See, focus on what makes you truly great, literally. Focus on that. Look for what makes others great. Bring it to your job. Bring it to minor hockey every day. Don't half step. Bring it. Or the status quo will prevail, and you'll stay in that free fall. So anybody know why I have meerkats in here? So meerkats are very social. They're known to live in large groups. They constantly communicate. They're anchored by teamwork, and they all have different individual worlds to make their small societies work. And do you know why? It's essential to their survival. You're all meerkats. Congratulations. But it's all about relationships and social capital. I said I'm a social capitalist, social capital expert. I define social capital as the cultural and economic or even personal value obtained from relationships and experiences shared by people, communities, and entities. It requires ongoing investment and cultivation in people. But at times, it can be invisible. But it's up to you to put on the glasses and leverage social capital to identify and embrace opportunity at all times, even when the unseen seems impossible. See, back at home in Detroit, everybody wanted to build all these cool buildings, and it sounds like, you know, that, oh, what is he talking about? What does he mean by this? And how you perceive value and experiences is up to you. But what I would beg to offer that it's not your cool uniforms or winning or cool marketing campaigns by themselves. It's not about holding up the past at the expense of the future or hollow metrics or trophies. The value is actually in the people. And the value depends on the investments made and how you see your role in moving this organization forward. The power of one, the power of all. And that means recognizing these blind spots we talked about in terms of how others experience minor hockey. And embrace your colleagues who are experiencing the same level of change and stress that you are, and remembering that you don't have to do it alone. See, Kim taught me this. The name of my company is 2050 Partner, and our mission is to help people, organizations, and cities stay relevant and connected as demographics, trends, and industries shift across the world. We make a choice every day to find value in the inevitable disruption that we all will face. Disrupt or be disrupted. Pull for the moon. Don't wait for something to happen and you make it happen, or it will happen to you. It'll be reflected in the exchanges that you have with your colleagues and every other stakeholder within the GTHL universe. Got two more slides. They're quick. So I had to think about, like, man, what could I leave them with? Something real simple and plain. Like, you have an opportunity to just be honest with you, redefine the community. Like, just redefine what your community means, right? That's where people want to be connected. Like, at the end of the day, once you win a game and it's cool, you go home and you live life. You live, work, and you play. So at the end of the day, what difference does it make if you're winning if your community stinks? Think about that. Everyone can't win. There's always going to be one winner and one loser at the end of the day. But everybody can be a part of the change of today and the promise of tomorrow. And see, all of this might seem inconvenient, but I'm telling you, it's part of the process. Disruption is a buzzword, but it really does make a difference to run towards the trouble. The GTHL can't stay the same. The greater Toronto can't stay the same, and you can't stay the same. But you have to reach. You have to search. See, what happens when people don't have those glasses on? Guess what? I always got a pair of glasses. I feel an obligation and a responsibility to tell you that you have to advocate and promote together. You have to engage, inform, and influence together. When I say together again, y'all say it with me. You have to convene, guide, and govern. You have to measure, report, and recommend. You have to validate, certify, and incentivize. And you have to share, collaborate, and mentor. You got to keep showing up. Keep talking, because this is the first step, and tomorrow's the real work. And don't stop believing. These are your next steps. But before I close with my last slide, I got a little exercise I want everybody to do. Everybody do like this. You looking at me? Everybody. All right. Put your fingers like this on your chin. Now, how many people put it on their chin and how many people put it on their cheek? The point that I'm making is, man, this stuff is just words. Actions speak louder than words. Show up, role model the behavior that you want to see in your organization, and just remember, I'm here for you, and I got your back. Thank you.
Well, I don't know how I follow that. All I wanted to tell you, though, is that Marlowe has been maybe a little more heavily involved in the summit than he admitted to there. And we're pleased that he's taken the time out to help us with all of this. He's going to be around tomorrow as well. So if you have any questions, concerns, comments, he's very approachable, as you can tell. Certainly an inspiration to all of us here as we look to the future. Well, now, once again, it's Ekta and John's turn.
Thanks a lot, Marlowe. That was one of my favorite karaoke songs, Don't Stop Believin'. Now I can't get it out of my head. All righty, so moving us to the last set of post-speaker discussion opportunity. All right, so there's questions on this slide, but here's what I'm doing. Because this is kind of that last funneling opportunity, and because Marlowe said a number of things in there which are kind of underlying these questions, but I'm going to take a second here to just pull some of those themes from what he said and relate them to some of these questions. Because again, there's words on the slide, and there's words, and then there's action. So let's try to take this down to that level of actions. So the first question here says, think about in life as your perspective has gradually shifted to become more inclusive, whatever that looks like for you, whatever that baseline might have been for you, and thinking about what helped that shift happen. How does something like that, a personal experience, influence your perspective on what an inclusive approach for the GTHL might look like? Because again, it's all about that shift and what are the actions that will help that shift to happen. So as you think about what helped that shift to happen in your life, what could you take from that into what might help the shift to happen for the GTHL? But here's what I thought was cool as Marlowe was speaking, and I'm going to link some of those words from his words, Marlowe, with his permission. He's not here, so I guess I have his permission. All right, so he was talking about creating a new story. So what really will help create that new story for the GTHL is in essence what that question is asking. By kind of having that yes and approach, things that will help make the GTHL uncancelable in today's cancel culture, as Marlowe said. So that's really the essence of what we're trying to get at here. Heads up, the last question on the slide that you see here, which says, how can we expand who is involved in the GTHL experience, is what your harvest focus will be this time around. But again, you'll have some time to kind of start broad, talk about these questions for about 10 minutes, and then we'll end with a 5-minute switch into actions to change that narrative and to change that story. So 10 minutes to start, and then another 5 for the pulling of the theme. Take it away, timekeepers, you know the drill.